Chaim v'bracha, to life and to blessings. Chaim. Life is what we're doing right now. Learning Chassidus. Learning the Maimer, the Chassidic discourse said by the Rebbe in 1966. Basi Lagani. How we're making a world that, listen to the news, it's a jungle. And if you listen to the Maimer, we have to make a garden, God's garden. So we're speaking here to understand the concept that in being the foot soldiers to create God's garden, God gives us, empowers us with all the tools, ammunition, if you will, to fight the battle, to change a dark world into a world of light, a world of divinity, of godliness. So, in that, God is giving us given that the infinite light of God that goes down so far in such a dark place that I still feel connected. That's a mata mata adein tachlis. Below, as far as it goes. Right? Whether it's in the tunnels of Gaza, whether it's, personal trauma that you're going through, the light of God reaches there. But there's something even more that we get, and that is the above to no end, which above means that the infinite light of God goes above, beyond, that's hidden from us. It's hidden from us and not drawn to us. Well, this is what we're trying to give an explanation of. So we said that to understand that, that's the idea of a metaphor. A metaphor hides the wisdom in the metaphor. And sometimes you need a metaphor of a metaphor to understand the wisdom that's hidden there. Furthermore, another metaphor for this is the stories of the Torah. God's divine wisdom is very clear when it comes to Jewish law. It's laid out very clearly, especially when we learn Rambam, Maimonides. We see the parameters of the law, and we know what God wants and what His wisdom is. It's there, it's very clear. Now, some things might be very clear and obvious, other things, we have to work through. But, it's not hidden. Not meant to be hidden, meant to be revealed. So in the Mishnah might be a little more hidden. You need a little more wisdom to understand the short form. It's written in, if you will, shorthand. So we have elongated in the Gemara, comprising the Talmud, that makes it easier for us to appreciate and understand. But stories really bring out something much deeper. It's not directly God's wisdom that we perceive, because we're perceiving a story. But because it's sort of like that disconnect, God's wisdom is here, the wisdom is even much deeper. It's kind of like hidden. It's hidden in the story. So much so that every year, we go back and we have to find the wisdom. Not like, the kid that was learning the story of Joseph and being thrown into the pit by his brothers. So year after year, child would cry when it come to that story. Then one year, child said, I'm not crying anymore. So the teacher asked, why? He says, well, last year and the year before, he was thrown into the pit. And obviously he's not learning the lesson. Not learning the lesson? Well, that's his problem. And I'm not crying for him anymore. So that's a cute story. But brings out that no. The story every year, when we learn it, gets deeper and deeper and more profound and more profound. We see things in it that we didn't see before. Why? Because the story hides the wisdom. In a certain way, someone who writes a novel, right? It's depicting them in a deeper way than if they would write, ideas. This is my idea about life, right? And if you would, here is this is my manual for life. So, okay, you get a clear conscious, you get a clear understanding of the conscious awareness that that author had for, this is my wisdom for life. But when you write it, when the writer of a story writes a story, it could be a fiction story, a fiction. They're actually putting more of them in the story, but not consciously. Some parts will be conscious, yes, that this is the plot and this is the message. But because it's in a story, there's things that the author doesn't know about themselves, maybe, that they're putting into the storyline, because they're putting themselves into it. That's why also when you hear a story, you could understand it, everybody differently. Everybody takes a different message from the story. When it comes to the halacha, Jewish law, it's very specific, it's very clear. Now sometimes there might be aspects of the law that are not clear, but for the most part, it's very clear what the teachings are saying. Tefillin need to be put on this way, and this is the what makes it kosher, that's tefillin. This is not kosher, and it's very clear because you're revealing what the parameter of the law is. And therefore, yes, can there be some difference of understanding and interpretation on certain things, on the peripheral of the law, but the basic law, not really. It's very clear. But in the story, the essential story, everybody will take it differently because everybody comes from a different place, and therefore they are perceiving it differently. And the message they take might be completely different one from another, might be extremely different. Not with the law, not in the law itself, right? That's why stories, because they are connected to the deeper part of the person who's telling the story, the subconscious of the person, and they're not consciously aware when they write down a fictional story of how that is, they're putting themselves in there in a deeper way. Now that's a regular person who writes a novel. God writing the Torah and the stories of the Torah, as we're speaking about, that's much more deeply hiddenness of the author that's in the story. That's why, we learn every day Chumash and Rashi. So we're learning it on the simple level. But if we were, to dig deeper, we would constantly be seeing more secrets in the story that are being revealed every year that when we study it, when the Torah portion comes up. Again, we learn Chumash and Rashi, so we're kind of focused on in somewhat a more of a limited manner. We're not learning the depths of the secrets that are there. Although there are secrets, because as the Rebbe explains, the Yainish Shel Torah, there's the wine of Torah that's in Rashi, which, sometimes we get to, usually not. Okay. In any case. Now, what's the whole point of this? Okay, remember that this is a metaphor to understand. Metaphor is a metaphor to understand. Stories of the Torah are a metaphor to understand. What is it that God is empowering us with, something that is above to know, the light of God, the infinite light of God that is above to no end, that is concealed to us. So it's not the stories that God's giving to us. That's just a metaphor for us to understand. Right? But we'll see where we're, metaphor upon metaphor. So let's understand this more deeply. What is the whole point? Again, the stories of the Torah we'll understand it by teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. A metaphor the Baal Shem Tov gives of a king that sends away his son, his only son, to a far distant place in order that afterwards he should have greater pleasure. Whether the son has greater pleasure, the king has greater pleasure, right? After many, the metaphor continues. After many days, after much time, it was forgotten from the son of the king all of the pleasures that the king has. Right? Like, one of the pleasures the king has is actually to see his son. As, being the heir of the throne, being the beloved of the father, right? To see him. And, well, he's seventh in the way. Remember, it's a metaphor. So he sends after him, people from the palace. But the son doesn't want to return to his father. Whoa. Doesn't want to return. Anybody that the king sent, all of the important ministers, to go try to convince him to come back to his father. Nothing else. No. Until then came one wise person, wise sage. And what did he do, the sage? He changed his clothing. He changed his language, right, in order that it would be similar to the son. And he got close to him. He got close to him on his level, where he's coming from. And he was able to return him to his father. Okay, that's a metaphor. What does it mean to you? Well, the Rebbe says that this is a metaphor to understand the stories of Torah. The stories of the Torah are enclosed in a narrative, in a physical, story. Joseph gets thrown into the pit. Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge and good and evil. That's a story, right? So this is a metaphor for this. To understand, right? So what does it mean? So God is the king, right? And he sends us, the soul, far and distant from him, this world. Right? Far and distant. Right? A soul in a body, in a physical world. That's really distant from God. Distant from God, that's, that's as it were, right? At least from our perspective. Distant from God. That's what we're learning in Tanya right now. From our perspective, God spoke, and we feel our separateness from God. That's distant, right? So much so, we don't want to return to the king. Hey, we just want to have a good life. We just want to enjoy life. We don't want to return, right? God sends to us all these messengers, all these heavenly, he sends us an angel. He sends us, heavenly stuff. Not interested. Then he sends us a wise, the Torah. And why does he send us in the Torah? He tells us the stories of the Torah. What do you mean? Well, that wise person, what did the wise person do in order to return the son? He dressed and talked the language of the son, right? He had a new language. He had a new dress code. It wasn't the language of the father and his father in the palace. It wasn't of the king. It wasn't the language. It wasn't the clothing, right? Same thing here. We changed our way. We changed our way. We're not dressing the way we dress in heaven, close to God. We speaking a language that is, language here doesn't mean that we're speaking English rather than Hebrew or Lashon HaKodesh. That's not what it means. It means we communicate in a different way totally. The soul and the way it is above is communicating divinity. The soul down here is communicating mundane, physical, comfort, pleasure. So the son doesn't want to come back. Not interested. Until a chacham comes, the wisdom of Torah comes, and it clothes itself in the language of that person. What's the language of that person? That son. Story. Tells him a story. Doesn't tell him the law. Doesn't tell him the law. It tells him a story. Story of Adam and Eve. The story of Abraham. The story of, right? All these stories. Why? Because now you're speaking about, hey, a story of life. Oh, okay. That's my language of life down here. Not a heavenly life. I don't know that language. Earthly bound life. Oh, that's the stories. Our stories of, Abraham and Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, whole book of Genesis, right? Whatever story it is, hey, it's a story down here, so, you can relate to. Like, that young guy that said, I'm not crying for Joseph anymore. He didn't learn the lesson after all these years. Year after year, I learned the story, read the Torah portion. Oh, he still didn't stay away from his brothers. Should have stayed away from him. Wouldn't have got thrown in the pit. Yeah. The first year, you didn't learn the lesson. The next year, hey, it's a story that you can relate to. What's in that story? The hiddenness of the divine wisdom of God. I think you're speaking a person's language. Hidden in there. If you came and you just spoke divinity, the son wouldn't be interested. That's not my language. Oh, you're telling me a story. That's why by Fabringens, we tell stories. Try to tell stories. Because a story is speaking someone else's language. When you speak soul talk and you tell, right, and you tell somebody, about how to lead a better life, well, you know what? Not everybody is a vessel for that. Some people are. Some people you could rebuke them and they take it. Some people you could speak to them about how to improve their lives. When you tell a story, in the story that captures that captures the entirety of the person. When you tell them about self-improvement, well, maybe you capture their mind. You tell them about how how acting this way is not appropriate. So maybe you touch their heart too. Where do you capture the entirety of the person? In a story. And you see that. Then when you tell the story, people listen much more. Why? Because you're capturing the entirety of the person, not just an aspect of them. Because the story captures the entirety of God, even the Torah stories of the Torah, even the things that are most hidden, captures, right? As opposed to the law itself, which is revelatory. The story is hidden. And that's why the message can always get deeper and deeper, right? Not like that child who just, same message every year, right? Same message. Foolish Joseph, right? No. Much more there. Very powerful. Okay, more to come on this. Did you get that, folks? Yeah, you got it? Got the message? All right, thank you. Along